TesseracT is really dumb. Blink-182 has a new record, and we're talking about new records from End, Hollowfront, and Taking Back Sunday. See you in a second. What's up, everyone, and welcome to the new segment on the Metalcore Nerds YouTube, where we talk all about music in the alternative space. I'm your host, Sean Mott, and joining me, hopefully weekly, my friend Matt Roth. What's up, my dude?
I've done it. I've become the metalcore daddy. No, I'm just kidding. I had to put that for some buffoonery, but no, yeah, dude. Yes, every week, let's spin the newest records. Let's talk some jams, and man, we got a lot of good albums and a lot of maybe not so good albums to be coming up.
Yeah. There's a lot coming up. It's kind of like release season right now.
Yeah, it is.
Tons coming out. But first, before we talk about new music, I want to talk about something that's been pretty hot topic in the past week or so. TesseracT, the drummer of TesseracT to be specific, released the most insane statement I have ever seen. And I love that his caption, it's a bunch of screenshots of notes, but the caption is a light bulb. And it's basically him talking about how merch people should not get all the tips they get at merch.
I realized some of you didn't realize that the tips that you're giving doesn't go to the band, and these merch people are making $30,000 upwards.
I know there's some merch people, especially at that level, that make a lot of money. But if the merch people are making more than the band, that is fully on them because they're terrible at budgeting.
If you're selling that much merch to where they're making $30,000, like you should be getting a good piece of that. Like you should be making a good amount.
So yeah, TesseracT's dumb. And the dumbest part is that he kind of doubled down and was like, JK.
But here's a separate QR code that we're going to have up at our table at each show to where you can tip the band directly if you also want to tip us. Just saying.
Yeah, insane. But let's talk about some more positive things from new music. Blink-182 is back with Tom. They just released a new album, One More Time, and I just got to say, it jumps off with Anthem Part 3. And if that doesn't make you feel 12 years old again, I don't know what will.
I haven't listened to the record yet, just because there were some unforeseen circumstances. But man, I was looking at the track listing, and yeah, I mean Anthem Part 3. And then it's just a lot of the song title names. It's like, this is Blink. Like Blink is back. And it's titled One More Time. So maybe this might be their final record. Who knows? They are getting older, but they're touring regularly. Tom seems like he's having fun for now until he decides he's not anymore.
Yeah, it's good. It's a really awesome thing to see. It makes me happy. You know, and the coolest thing about this record, I think, like, I don't think it's perfect. I don't fully love it, but I think it's a solid record. But my favorite part is that you can hear the influence from newer pop punk bands. And there's even like one riff in the beginning of a song, it's Terrified, sounds like a Turnstile riff, who they just toured with, who obviously they were a fan with them if they took them on tour before. After the first riff, it goes straight into like a Blink sounding song. But I was like, I love seeing bands that were influenced by Blink growing up 100%, especially like the Story So Far. A lot of the leads feel Story So Far.
Oh yeah.
And now they're like influencing Blink. It's like this awesome circle of music. And that's like my favorite part of the record. A lot of it does sound, and we'll kind of get into this next album. It's taking the old Blink-182. It gives you that nostalgic feeling, but it still has this modern vibes to it, and it still feels current with the landscape of everything else. And I feel like that's a very hard thing to do that a lot of bands from like when we were younger don't pull off very well.
No.
And they did it in this record. So I'm excited for you to check it out and let me know what you think about it. But let's get into, we got 3 big records to talk about. So Taking Back Sunday, they just released a new record, 152.
We talked until the sun came up. It meant so much we don't remember what.
This is the band's 8th studio album and their first on Fantasy Records, the follow-up to their 2016 album, Tidal Wave. The band, of course, is a cornerstone of emo music, Personal being a launching point for me music-wise when I was a teenager.
Yeah, I mean, it's Taking Back Sunday, right? They like kind of disappeared for a bit and they started doing shows again. And I actually caught them last year when we were young. And of course, they aren't the Taking Back Sunday of 2004 that we fell in love with. I know there's been a lot of hate for Adam and how his voice was, but they're out there having fun, man. Like their stage presence is still just a lot of fun.
Mhm.
And this album, it was interesting because we talked about this. The first spin through, you're like, all right, it's not the Taking Back Sunday that we think of. However, after a couple listens through, it kind of grows on you,
Yeah.
particularly the middle of the album. The middle of the album actually grew on me a bunch. And like Quit Trying, for example, that song really, really became like my go-to on the second and third spin through. Not for whatever reason. It's just weird how that kind of happens.
Yeah, like we were talking about it as we were kind of prepping for the show, and the first spin, I was like, okay, this is definitely not the Taking Back Sunday we fell in
It was
love
like
when
country
we
Taking
were
Back
younger.
Sunday.
Yeah, there's some bands that can recapture that magic, like I talked about with Blink-182. I think the New Story of the Year record does it. Even the new Used record does it, where it has a nostalgic feeling, but it still has a modern twist to it. But for me, is I think the biggest thing is as a record, I don't really like it as a record. But as I was listening to it, even the first time when I was like, I'm not really vibing with this, I was like, the songs are solid because like Tidal Wave, not really a fan of it. Mostly, I think probably because of Adam's vocals. He definitely
Yeah.
dials it back in this one, and it's kind of like a mix of his newer style and his older style, which I like a lot better. And I was like, these songs are good, but the way they flow together doesn't feel right. There's no, and what I mean by flow together is that there's no like peaks and valleys. There's no like massive bangers like you're used to with like really all-time records. And I think that's the problem with the record. But like you said, with multiple listens, I was like, wow, this actually is like a pretty good Taking Back Sunday record at the end of the day.
My feelings can be summed up like this, man, as I'm listening, because you're right. They, as a whole, if you're listening front to back, it doesn't tie seamlessly together.
Yeah.
Like some albums, they just flow from song to song. This is something that I would put on at a brewery when I'm sitting there having a beer or
Oh
whatever.
yeah.
Right? You're at a bar and you're just like, you don't even know it's playing, but you just know there's music and you're like bobbing your head, vibing, all that kind of stuff. It's bar background music. It's the easiest way I can kind of just, and it's not a bad for a band. They're in their 40s. They've been around over 20 years. That's not like a
Yeah.
knock on them, because at the same time, you're still like, it sets that kind of vibe mood if you're just playing it in the background.
Yeah, that's very well put, I think. Favorite tracks you have on this one?
Yeah, like I said, Quit Trying was probably the best track for me. And then Juice to Me wasn't terrible. That was probably my second favorite one. I didn't like the start of the album at first, probably because it was so jarring a little bit. So
Pretty
I don't
slow.
really care. That's like Amphetamine Smiles is probably my least favorite song. And typically when you go into an
Oh,
album,
that's a
you want
single.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when you go into an album, you're expecting that first song because it's usually their single. It's usually you're starting the album. This is what a taste of it is. And to me, it wasn't a good representation of what this album actually is.
That's fair. Yeah, my favorites are The One, which honestly sounds like a Louder Now B-side song. And
Yeah.
then same with Lightbringer. Those kind of have the Louder Now vibes, not fully, but you can feel it, which is funny because it's like the Tell All Your Friends lineup. So Fred's not in
Yeah.
it, and that was a Fred album. But yeah, I think those two are the ones that definitely stood out to me. Where especially second through, I was like, okay, this has a little more oomph to it. This
Yeah.
has a little more of that pop that I wanted from this band. For rating, we're here on this show. We're doing out of 5. I'm giving this one a 3 out of 5.
Honestly, that's exactly where I'm at with this. Like, it doesn't reinvent the wheel. You have to go into this very much being like, this is not 14, 15-year-old me listening to Taking Back Sunday. This is kind of where they're at now. And that's not a problem. Again, I think it benefits from Adam realizing he can't hit those high highs like he used to be able to. And so he dials it back and it works for what they're doing. And it's not a bad album. If you listen it just from song to song, it just doesn't mold together front to back.
Going to the heavy side, we got Hollow Front. They have their new album, The Fear of Letting Go. This is the band's third full-length album coming out via UNFD. This is a new beginning of the band, as it's only two core members now, Tyler Tate on vocals and Lee on guitar. Lee produced and recorded the album in his home studio, and Tyler, for the first time, took on both the screaming and the clean vocal duties for this record. And I gotta say, that's the highlight for me for this record is the vocals. The vocal
I was
range on
gonna
this
say.
record is ungodly impressive. And I love the way they kind of span into different like subgenres of metalcore. Like some of the stuff sounds like Fit for a King, some of the stuff sounds like the Architects, some has like some genty vibes in it. And a lot of metalcore stuff can come off very generic, and I think they took it a little step above with this record. Super solid production. It flows super well. The choruses are so catchy. When they're heavy, they're really heavy. Some songs even sound like Gideon.
It's almost like they're experimenting with their new lineup on this one.
Mm,
And you can kind of get that, like, what is the vibe that they want to go with when, so they experiment kind of from different genres within the metalcore genre, which works. Honestly, like you said, it flows very well together. It starts off really freaking good. And the vocals were without a doubt a highlight for me, because sometimes it can be like, oh, you're straining your voice trying to do the screams, so you don't really put as much into your
mm.
cleans. But I thought he did a fantastic job. Like, he killed it on this record. That's a very big standout for me.
Yeah, one of my favorites tracks of the record, Under Pressure, has this like hip hop R&B melody in one of the verses, and I'm like, yo,
That's my song of the album. Spoiler alert.
I love when
That,
metalcore does the hip hop R&B thing. Sleep Token did it.
yep.
I love that kind of stuff. I'm a massive sucker for it. And like we both just praised, like the singing on this record especially is so good. Like it is like impressively good. And I just had Tyler on the podcast actually for the second time, but he was just on the episode that's coming out tonight, the day this drops, and he was talking to me about, because Lee was originally the producer of the band, not even in the band, and then he ended up joining, and now is, it's just him and Tyler. So I was like asking him about the writing process, and he was saying he's like, it's kind of the same, because it was kind of what we always did. He's like,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. It was like a seamless transition. Did you have any other favorite tracks?
Yeah, actually, Good Things Never Last is my other favorite track.
Okay.
It's one that kind of gets you in your feelings a little bit. I don't know if it's because of just, I was listening to it this morning while I was working out after just having a rough day yesterday. So like that one kind of leapt up. So I don't know if it's one of those like, oh, I'm just in my feelings this morning kind of thing.
Yeah,
But
maybe.
it's I like the lyrics in it, man. I mean, it's very telling. I thought the lyrics were another strong point of this album. They're not your generic. They kind of get a little deeper, hit a little
Yeah.
harder. And aside from that, I thought the album actually ends extremely strong with Letting Go. Like,
Yes.
sometimes bands tend to go a little softer whenever they are ending an album, but this one, like, they let it rip. And to me, it's really, really solid ending to this album.
Yeah, another favorite of mine is from the beginning, The Fear Of. I really dig that album.
Yeah.
It just kind of hits all the spectrums, and it has a really nice flow to it, and it kind of gives you a little bit of everything the band has to offer. And I really like that. And then Breaking Teeth, which is probably one of the heaviest songs on the record. That one is also super dope.
They're not afraid to get heavy on this
No.
too, which I
Nice.
love.
So, Matt, out of 5, what do you give this one?
Honestly, man, I'm giving this a 4.5.
4.5.
I'm gonna go 4.5. I really dug this album.
I'm gonna give this one a 4. I really liked it, but I like 4.5 is gonna be kind of saved for like things that I like absolutely
I could
love.
tell you next week's show is probably gonna have my first 5 out of 5.
Oh, okay. Look out for that one. All right. Okay, last record we're going to talk about today, End, with their new album, The Sin of Human Frailty. And this is the sophomore release from the band, coming at you from Closed Casket Activities. Of course, if you do not know anything about this band, it's the supergroup made up of Brendan Murphy of Counterparts, Will Putney of Fit for an Autopsy and now Better Lovers, Jay Pepito from Reign Supreme, Greg Thomas, formerly of Misery Signals and Shai Hulud, and a million other bands. That dude is phenomenal. And Matt, who is also in the Acacia Strain. I got to say, if you love End, if you've been a fan of End, you're going to like this record or love it.
This album makes you want to go out and kick puppies, and just like really throw down, man, somewhere. You're ready to like really fuck shit up after listening to this album.
It's one of those records I like to say you feel like you can pick up the world.
Yeah.
It's great gym record. It's fast, heavy, pissed off. You know, the people involved in this band are the best of the best, two of the most touted producers that are out there, and they are the key writers for this band. So it makes perfect sense that this band is just fucking awesome. And I do love that it doesn't really sound like anything else the members do. And I think that's the coolest part about the band is they really stand out, and they can kind of play with a ton of different bands. Like they're going on tour with Full of Hell, which is like a
Mhm.
super noisy, heavy, grindy kind of band, which they fit in with that. But they also saw them on tour with Misery Signals and Comeback Kid, and they fit both those different sides of the spectrum. And I really do like that. You know, it is an end record, but they did add some new elements into their sound. They added this like industrial feel that it's not, they didn't overdo it, because a lot of bands when they go into that realm, it kind of like takes over their sound. I've
Yeah.
seen it happen a ton of times, but they kind of just sprinkle it in a few songs, like Hollow Earn and Thaw. And I really love that. It's just like this new little spice to the sound of the band. And they also seemingly added a couple more melodic kind of parts. And it's not like overly doing it. It's like they added it in like a super heavy way, which makes sense with like Greg's past projects. So it makes sense that that stuff would kind of creep its way into it, but it's kind of like sneakily creeped in. It's like just like a few guitar riffs and stuff. It's not like an overall melodic thing, but I really liked those additions to the record. What'd you think about this one?
Man, one thing I really like about this album is the fact that Brendan really kind of lets loose on his vocals.
Oh
With
yeah.
you counterparts, he kind of has that straining feel to it. Whereas this, man, he really gets into his growls. He really gets into
Mhm.
just like really deep guttural screams, and that to me jives so hard, man. It really adds to the heaviness and the flavor of what this band does. Again, like, if you've heard of them, you know that they can go freaking hard, especially when you've come from their backgrounds. To me, the heaviest, probably the hardest song, which is actually my favorite one too, is Leper, the very final song on
One of
the,
my favorites
the
too.
album. It again, it makes you want to go out there, lift the world, really just fucking go wild. If zombie apocalypse is happening and you can put one song on to go out there and just take on a horde of zombies yourself, it's probably this one for me. And I'm going to go out there and just reign supreme, dude. It is hard.
Yeah, it's a sick record. And you kind of expect that and you want that, and I'm glad they delivered on
Yeah.
that. Like you said, Leper is one of my favorite. Another one of my favorites is Twice Devour Killed. Also, just like a sick, unrelenting, heavy ass song.
Yeah. The
It's a
sin of human
solid.
frailty is another one for me. Like,
The singles are so heavy. Like I
yeah.
remember when that dropped, and I was like, Jesus Christ. My friend always makes the jokes, and my friend Matt, another friend Matt, he'll hit me up and be like, "Man, I wish this song was heavier." Man, I thought their new stuff was gonna be heavy. Just like joking because it's just like
I like it.
so
Well, like, how many bands come out and be like, this is the heaviest shit we've ever written. And then it's just like the least heaviest thing I've ever seen in my
yeah.
life.
I like when bands let the music talk. I'm giving this one a 4 out of 5 also. Solid
Yeah. This
record.
one, 4 out of 5.
Yeah, it's good.
I
It's a good
think
record.
my my only complaint, if I had to have a complaint to be like, why isn't this a 5? You're over here raving. It's because I think at a point, kind of in the middle of the album, it flows almost too well to like the songs sound like one long sound, like one long song.
That's
There's
fair.
no real like, oh, this is this song and this. They kind of like blend together, and that's not a knock. I don't hate that, but I
Yeah.
think that's almost an issue where, yeah, but it's still 4 out of 5, man. This album fucking
Yeah,
rips.
super solid rating, and I would agree to that to a certain extent too. It's their first EP had the song "Necessary Death," and that's like their song. And I
Yeah,
think even like the last two albums haven't had a song like that, like the song where you're like, "Yo, that song's gonna go off when they play it live." And
right.
I feel like they haven't done a song since that song that's like that. And I think that's probably the biggest thing missing from that band. But the band is still like we just raved about the band for just a few minutes. Like the band is
Yeah,
incredible. I'm not taking anything away from them at all. And I don't think that's their goal. They're just trying to write like really cool, heavy,
yeah.
technical
It's like a
music.
side project. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not their sole livelihood. It's just like, here we're a bunch of dudes. We have our other bands. Let's get together and let's just go have some
Yeah.
fun and see what we can do with this.
But yeah. So that's it for this one. We'll be back next week talking some more new albums. But before we out here, Matt, tell them people where they can find you.
Yeah, man. So I am usually on a show, Hops Geek News. You can find us anywhere. You know, if you listen to podcasts, I've been on Metalcore Nerds a ton of times. So at this point, if you don't know, then where have you been? Because I talk comic books, movies, TV shows as well. And then every week I am on a show called Turn a Page through Nerd Initiative, talking straight up comic books. And I also write a bunch of comic book reviews for that website. So that's where I'm at.
Yes, and of course, if you want to support more Metalcore Nerds, the podcast out every week where we talk pop culture with people from the music industry, mostly bands. And then you can follow me on my personal account at Sean Xma on Instagram and Twitter. See you next week, guys.